The sky above Gaza hung low, dusted with ash and streaked by smoke trails like the remnants of forgotten prayers. Morning didn't break here, it merely arrived in silence, wearing the cloak of yesterday's sorrow. Amid the rubble of what once was a family home, a 19-year-old boy sat hunched over a dented kettle, trying to coax a flame from the twisted metal beneath it. His name was Yusuf. His eyes were the color of darkened olive wood, the same shade as the pendant hanging from his neck, a small piece of carved wood inscribed with a single word, Hussain. He hadn't spoken aloud in 3 days. There hadn't been anyone to speak to. His younger brother had died in the last airstrike. His neighbors were gone, their house now a crater where twisted rebar and a scorched child's toy stuck out like tombstones. But Yusuf remained. Not because he was brave. Not because he was hopeful. Because he didn't know what else to do. The quiet was shattered by a distant thump, a sound Gaza knew too well. Dust jumped from the ground, windows trembled in their shattered frames, and somewhere nearby, a mother's scream flared into the air before being swallowed by the void. Yusuf didn't flinch. Instead, he turned the pendant over in his fingers like a worry stone, whispering a verse his father used to say when the nights felt too long. Every day is Ashura. Every land is Karbala. That verse had once been a bedtime story. Now it felt like a prophecy that bled from the earth itself. Later that afternoon, he joined the line of people waiting outside what remained of a food distribution center. The sun burned overhead, but no one complained. Hunger quieted rebellion. As Yusuf moved forward, a girl stumbled past the crowd, clutching her side. Blood soaked her abaya. She collapsed just meters away from him. Without hesitation, he rushed forward and knelt beside her. She was not from here. That much was clear. Her accent betrayed a different Arabic, sharper, with a rhythm like poetry. Iraqi, perhaps. Her eyes fluttered open briefly. "My brother," she whispered. "I have to find him." Yusuf looked around. No medics. No aid workers. Only silence, and the smell of burning concrete. He pulled the scarf from his neck and pressed it against her wound. "You'll be fine," he said, not knowing whether it was a lie. She smiled faintly. "I thought they'd look different," she said. "Followers of Hussain." Her voice cracked, like dry earth beneath a rising sun. "But you just watch." The words stung. Like fire against raw skin. She passed out before he could respond. He carried her on his back through alleys and ghost-like corridors of the city, navigating the maze of shattered buildings. He brought her to a makeshift shelter hidden beneath an old mosque, where a small group of locals offered quiet refuge to those in need. There, under the pale flicker of a solar lantern, he cleaned her wound with bottled water and old cloth. Her name was Zainab. She had come to Gaza with a volunteer convoy 3 weeks earlier. Her brother, Ali, had gone missing during a food drop near the eastern border. She stayed behind to find him. "I couldn't leave him behind," she murmured when she finally awoke. "Not again." Yusuf didn't press for details. But he listened. For the first time in days, he listened. That night, Yusuf sat near the edge of the mosque's ruined courtyard, his eyes lifted toward a sky with no stars, only drones that blinked like watching eyes. Zainab limped toward him and sat beside him in silence. "You don't speak much," she said after a while. "There's nothing left to say," he replied. She studied him. "You wear his name around your neck. But do you follow his path?" Yusuf's fingers found the pendant again, his grip tightening. "Hussain didn't live here." "No," she said softly. "But he died everywhere." The fire in her voice surprised him. Not loud, not angry, but burning from a deeper place. "Do you think Karbala was one day? One battle? It lives again and again. In Najaf. In Syria. In Yemen. And now, in Gaza. You don't need a sword to follow Hussain. You just need the courage to rise when silence feels safer." Her words sat with him long after she returned to her corner of the shelter. That night, sleep came like a stranger, uneasy and unwelcome. Yusuf dreamed. He stood on a field, cracked and dry, beneath a sun that burned like judgment. Children wept beside tents. Women cried into the sand. And in his arms, a child, lifeless, pale, silent. The wind carried whispers. Would you offer him, too? A shadowed figure stood before him, hand outstretched, cloaked in blood and moonlight. He awoke with tears streaming down his face. At dawn, he found Zainab sitting in the courtyard, praying quietly. Her hands moved with a grace that reminded him of his mother. He sat beside her without a word. After a moment, she asked, "Did you dream?" He nodded. They say dreams in war carry truth. Yusuf looked down at the cracked tiles, voice rough. I don't want to just survive anymore. Zainab turned toward him. Her eyes met his, clear and unwavering. Then don't. He rose, slowly, deliberately, like a man waking after years of sleep. The first light of morning caught the edge of his pendant. It shimmered, faint, but steady. I want to rise, he said. Zainab smiled, not because she was hopeful, but because she had seen something shift. Not in the city, not in the war, but in him. Somewhere far off, the air rumbled again. But this time, Yusuf didn't duck. He stood taller. The days that followed passed not in hours but in quiet battles, against hunger, fatigue, fear. Yusuf no longer wandered aimlessly. He walked with purpose now, following Zainab through Gaza's ruined corridors like a shadow with a spine. Together, they moved beneath crumbling buildings, mapping out paths only the desperate used. They weren't looking for safety. They were looking for survivors. Zainab's wound had mostly closed, but the limp remained, reminding her with every step of the cost of standing too close to the truth. She didn't complain. She wrote instead, names, dates, coordinates, faces of the forgotten. She documented what others ignored: the boy who lost his leg while fetching water, the girl who used her scarf to bandage a neighbor's head, the old woman who whispered Zainab, ya Zainab into the cold each night. Yusuf watched her scribble everything into a worn notebook, the cover barely held together by tape. When he asked why she kept records no one might read, she replied without looking up. Because Karbala wasn't remembered by the swordsman. It was remembered by the one who spoke after the swords fell. They became a pair of ghosts gliding through the smoke. At night, they returned to the shelter beneath the mosque, whispering plans and listening for drone patterns. Sometimes they ate. Sometimes they didn't. But every day, they saved someone. A child pulled from debris. A family guided to an underground tunnel. A wounded man given another chance to breathe. They were not alone for long. Word spread quietly. The boy with the Hussain pendant. The girl with the black scarf and Iraqi tongue. Others joined. Some brought food. Others brought silence and willing hands. It wasn't an army. It was a resistance stitched together with hope and shared grief. But beneath it all, Yusuf carried a quiet weight. His father's words haunted him more now than ever, not just as memories, but as responsibilities. Late one night, as he searched through a rusted tin box of his father's belongings, he found a piece of paper, half burned at the edges. A letter. The handwriting was hurried but familiar. To my son, it read. If the world forgets Hussain, be his echo. If it fears the truth, be its voice. May you rise like Ali Akbar, not just in name, but in courage. Yusuf stared at the letter until dawn, the ink smudged with the salt of his tears. When he showed it to Zainab, her hands trembled. She didn't speak for a while. Finally, she folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the tin. Then we know what you must become. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. One evening, they moved toward the old medical station near the eastern corridor, what was left of it. They had heard of a boy wounded during a blast, his body buried beneath cement. By the time they arrived, soldiers had already begun to sweep the area. Zainab paused behind a collapsed wall, wincing as her leg protested. You go, she said. Get the boy. I'll draw them away if it comes to that. You can't run, Yusuf replied. I can be loud, she whispered. He didn't argue. He moved fast and low, slipping through smoke and concrete until he reached the boy, a small thing, no older than 8, his body shaking from shock. Yusuf wrapped him in his scarf, held him tight, and turned back. But the way was blocked now. A patrol had flanked them. Voices shouted in Hebrew. Rifles glinted under the moonlight. Yusuf froze. Zainab shouted something in Arabic, loud enough to turn every head. Then silence, followed by a single shot. He didn't think. He didn't blink. He ran, child in arms, zigzagging through the wreckage, his breath loud and desperate. A bullet ricocheted near his feet. Another cracked the wall beside him. But he didn't stop. He made it to the edge of a tunnel entrance and collapsed, lungs burning, the boy still breathing in his arms. A pair of hands pulled them both inside. It was one of the new volunteers, Jibril, a young student with shaky courage and steady hands. "Where's Zainab?" he asked. Yusuf looked back toward the ruins. No figure. No movement. Just smoke. He stumbled out, ignoring the calls behind him, heart drumming louder than the sirens above. As he neared the blast zone, a cough broke the stillness. She was there, slumped beside a wall, hand pressed to her side. Bleeding again. But alive. "You're an idiot," she whispered. "You were louder than I thought," he replied, lifting her gently. Back in the tunnel, the silence was thick. Zainab leaned against the stone wall, breath shallow but steady. "You stayed," she said. "I wasn't leaving you behind," he replied. Her hand reached up, brushing the pendant at his neck. "Now you understand. Following Hussain isn't about dying for a cause. It's about never letting anyone die alone." Yusuf nodded, eyes burning. Days later, Zainab rested on a mattress stitched from scraps. Her injury would heal, but her energy waned. Yusuf sat beside her, reading names from her notebook aloud like a prayer list. Each one meant something to someone. Each one mattered. Zainab looked at him with tired eyes. "Promise me something. Anything. When the time comes, speak. Don't let your silence become a grave." He hesitated, then reached into his shirt and pulled out the pendant. "Then teach me." And she did. She taught him how to document what he saw, how to speak with courage, how to recognize when the world would rather forget, and how to remind it anyway. He memorized quotes from Imam Hussain, speeches from Bibi Zainab, and testimonies from survivors. He practiced until his voice no longer shook. Until it carried. One evening, as they sat with a small group planning their next move, Zainab's hand found his. Her grip was light. "You are no longer just a survivor, Yusuf," she said. He looked at her, puzzled. "You are resistance." And in the quiet that followed, he finally believed it. The morning of the march arrived without fanfare, only the muted anticipation that lives in the breath before a storm. Gaza remained cloaked in dust, the ruins still fresh with the scent of smoke and sorrow, but something in the air had shifted. Yusuf stood before a cracked mirror nailed to the mosque's crumbling wall, wrapping Zainab's brother's keffiyeh around his shoulders. His hands moved with reverence, like a man donning armor not for battle, but for truth. He had spent the night rehearsing words that weren't meant to inflame, but to awaken. The courtyard had echoed with his voice as he practiced, standing in the same spot where his father once prayed. Now, every stone beneath his feet felt like it held a story, and he had promised himself not to let those stories die in silence. Zainab lay nearby, her breath shallow but steady. The infection had spread despite their efforts, but she refused to let anyone call it the end. "Not yet," she whispered. "Not until they hear us." Her eyes never left him as he prepared. Her strength was no longer in her legs, but in the fire she'd planted inside him. The plan was simple and dangerous. Hundreds had gathered in secret, carrying lanterns made from recycled bottles and small signs with names, not slogans, just names. The dead did not need slogans. They needed remembrance. Yusuf was to lead them to Martyrs Square, a place now surrounded by checkpoints and sniper towers. Their weapons were their feet and their voices. As the group formed, children at the front, women behind them, and the men surrounding them like a living wall, Yusuf took one last look at Zainab. Her lips moved in silent prayer. Then she gave him a nod so slight only he could understand it. They walked without chanting, a sea of silent defiance. The streets that once echoed with gunfire now trembled beneath the sound of shuffling feet. From balconies, those who had stayed hidden stepped into the light to watch. Some joined. Some wept. But none turned away. At the edge of Martyrs Square, the military waited. Their rifles glinted like snake teeth. Drones circled overhead, broadcasting the scene. The lead officer raised a megaphone and shouted for the crowd to disperse. Youssef didn't stop. He moved forward, slow and deliberate, until he stood a few meters from the soldiers. He pulled the wooden pendant from his chest, held it high in the air, and spoke, not with anger, but with a voice forged in fire and remembrance. You have taken our homes, our families, our limbs. But you will not take our memory. You will not erase our names. We are the blood of Hussain, and like him, we do not kneel. The officer shouted again, warning them. Youssef's voice rose. You fear our silence more than our stones. You fear that one day, the world will see us not as numbers, but as people. As mothers. As sons. As Hussein's followers, who do not forget and do not bow. The crowd surged with emotion, not in anger, but in resolve. Mothers raised photos of their children. Boys clutched lanterns tighter. Girls recited lines they had learned from Zainab's teachings. The square felt like Karbala, not in blood, but in spirit. Then came the crack of a rifle. Chaos threatened, but did not break them. The bullet hadn't been fired into the crowd, it struck the ground near Youssef's feet. A warning, or a signal. But he did not flinch. He stepped forward again. If I fall, another will rise, he said. If we all fall, our names will echo. You cannot defeat those who have already buried their fear. Cameras picked up his voice. Somewhere, miles away, a live stream captured his face. His pendant. His words. Within hours, the footage circled the globe. From Karbala to Karachi, from Beirut to London, vigils lit up in solidarity. Lanterns floated on rivers. Streets filled with the same silent march. Back in Gaza, the soldiers didn't fire again. That night, Youssef returned to the mosque. The crowd had dispersed, safe. The square had held them. Zainab was still, her face pale, her lips slightly parted. A nurse beside her shook her head gently. He dropped to his knees beside her, placing the keffiyeh she had given him back across her chest. He didn't cry. Not then. He only whispered, "They heard us." A week passed. Then too. The ceasefire came, not a solution, but a pause. Aid began to trickle back in. International eyes turned, if only briefly, toward Gaza. And in the space that opened, something new grew. Youssef began teaching. Not in a school, but in the mosque where it had all started. Children gathered beneath the broken arches. He spoke of Karbala and Palestine, not as history lessons, but as living truths. He showed them Zainab's notebook, now wrapped in cloth like a relic. He told them stories, not of martyrs who died, but of souls who refused to surrender. One day, a boy approached him, eyes wide and eager. Around his neck hung a small wooden pendant, roughly carved, the word Hussain freshly etched into its face. "Did she make this for you?" the boy asked. "No," Youssef replied with a smile. "She helped me earn it." The boy nodded solemnly, then sat beside him, lantern in hand. Outside, the city still bore its scars. But the walls surrounding the mosque had been painted anew. A mural of Youssef and Zainab, standing back to back, each holding a lantern in one hand and a name in the other. Beneath it, 3 words written in both Arabic and English. *** to follow Hussain, rise. ***. Youssef stood by that wall every morning before the children arrived. He traced the lines of her image with his eyes, remembering the sound of her voice, the weight of her silence, and the truth she planted in him. He had not changed the world. But he had refused to be buried by it. And in that refusal, he found something eternal. The seasons in Gaza do not change gently. They arrive like the world has been rewritten overnight, one day, suffocating heat, and the next, the chill of wind creeping through broken windows. The mosque, once a place of whispers and hiding, had transformed into a sanctuary of learning and resilience. But even as the children recited names of martyrs and poems of Karbala from memory, the world outside remained tense. The ceasefire had frayed at its edges. Drones returned to the sky, quiet again but always watching. Silence was no longer peace, it was the breath before fire. Yusuf woke before dawn, every day now. His sleep had grown lighter, filled with visions of shadowed figures and burning tents. Sometimes Zainab stood beside him in those dreams, her scarf blowing in the wind, her eyes searching the horizon. Sometimes she said nothing. Other times, only one sentence, "You still have more to say." He didn't know what she meant. He thought he had already said everything. The crowds had faded. The world's eyes had moved on. Social media posts became less frequent. News outlets grew quieter. Aid slowed again. It was as if the march never happened. But in the cracks of Gaza, people remembered. In the children's drawings, in the old woman who lit a candle every evening in the mosque's corner, in the young boys who began wearing keffiyehs stitched with the word Hussain, the spirit still moved. Yusuf stood before his small class, holding Zainab's notebook like scripture. His voice had matured, less fire now, more gravity. "Tell me who stood beside Hussain," he asked. The hands went up eagerly. "Ali Akbar," one said. "Abbas," another shouted. "Zainab bint Ali," a girl declared with pride. He nodded. "And today?" The class grew quiet. Yusuf placed the notebook down. "Today, it is you." That afternoon, a man arrived at the mosque, older, with a limp, and eyes that flicked too quickly between shadows. He introduced himself as a journalist from Lebanon, but not one with credentials. "I'm not here to report for the world," he said. "I'm here to remember what they've already forgotten." He had heard about the march, about the speech, about the boy with the pendant and the girl with the notebook. "You are becoming myth," he told Yusuf with a half-smile. "But myths only last if someone tells them again and again." Yusuf was reluctant at first. He didn't want cameras. He didn't want his name in headlines. But when he remembered Zainab's words, "Don't let your silence become a grave asterisk," he agreed. Over the next few nights, he told the journalist everything. His childhood, the fire, the letter from his father, meeting Zainab, the march, her death. The man took notes, recorded his voice, then gave him a flash drive. "I'll publish what I can. But this is for you. In case they bury the story again." 2 weeks later, the mosque was raided. No announcement. No warning. The soldiers came before dawn, stomping through the classrooms, tearing murals from the walls, burning books. They didn't find weapons. They weren't looking for them. They arrested 2 boys for carrying drawings of Hussein's shrine. Yusuf stood in front of the others, hands raised. "It's just art," he said. They struck him anyway. When he woke, he was in a small concrete room, dimly lit. His pendant was gone. A soldier came in, holding the keffiyeh in his hands. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Yusuf didn't answer. Another soldier entered. "He's the one. The speaker." They didn't torture him. Not in the old-fashioned way. They showed him videos of new bombings, of children dead, of homes reduced to dust. They said, "This is what your words bring." Then they left him in silence. But Yusuf no longer feared silence. He closed his eyes and heard the recitation of the children. He saw the faces of those they had rescued. He heard Zainab whisper, "Speak, even if your voice shakes." After 3 days, they released him. No charges. No explanations. Only a warning, "Disappear. Or we will make you disappear." He returned to the mosque, only to find it closed and guarded. The community was afraid. The children scattered. Mothers wept. The mural of him and Zainab had been painted over, grey now, like dust. But Yusuf did not disappear. He found a new shelter. An old tunnel, widened over the years by hidden hands. There, with the flash drive and Zainab's notebook, he started again. No crowd this time. No speeches. Only whispers passed from one boy to another. He taught in secret. Recorded videos in the dark, his face always half-covered. His voice traveled, not to the masses, but to the quiet hearts still listening. And soon, he was not alone again. One night, while exiting the tunnel, he found a young girl waiting for him. She was maybe 11, with eyes too old for her face. She held out a box. He opened it. Inside, a wooden pendant. The name Hussain, carved by hand. "My brother made it," she said. "He said, you shouldn't be without it." Yusuf looked at her, then took the pendant, his hands trembling. He placed it around his neck, over the place where his heartbeats still echoed like drums of resistance. That night, he stood atop a rooftop, looking toward the border, where the sky glowed faint with the lights of machines that watched them always. He raised the pendant to his lips. "They want silence," he said, "to no one and to everyone. But we are the children of Karbala." Below him, hidden in shadow, a dozen lanterns flickered into life, quiet, steady flames refusing to be snuffed out. And above, though the drones still hovered, one star dared to shine through the haze. It was enough.